in between things, that to me also a Zen concept, and that the spaces are just as important as the things that are, they're spaced between.
Yeah.
I see a lot of that in your work as well, and that Zen quality. It's very interesting when, you see something in someone's work and you go, that's why that's there. And I see that in your work when you talk about it, but, pretty fascinating when you talk about that. And you talk about the spaces and the time, we've alluded to a lot of that, but just, one more little bit about the spaces in between.
Wow. Well, when you say the word spaces, I hear the word silence. I actually, when you were talking about that, there was this really famous saying, and I can't quote by, who's that really famous trumpeter?
Miles Davis or Dizzy Gillespie?
Miles Davis. He said something. He said, it's not about the notes. It's about the silence in between the notes. And actually, it kind of gives me chills just thinking about that when I read that, because that's really it. It's not the note. It's like, that's it, and I guess I'm looking for silence, at the end of the day, through all of this composition and notes, if you will. It's like, as you said, I'm looking for a feeling of silence, and I feel myself pushing towards that even more so. Actually, oddly enough, I'm actually, this pandemic has allowed me just recently. My father in his office at work had this painting of Andrew Weiss. It's really famous. You're probably familiar with it. It's of a hanging deer in front of a barnyard. Really famous painting of his. And he had a print of that. And I never asked him why, but every time it was so startling because there's a certain brutality to it too. It's like this stark winter landscape with this dead deer hanging before they gut it and, process it for meat. And I've always been fascinated by that. And now I'm actually in that landscape where I live. And I, oddly enough, coincidentally enough, I suppose there are no coincidences, I saw this sign and it said deer processing. I go, what the hell is deer processing? So I Googled it, and there are all these places, and that's what they do. So in a way, I want to push. What I loved about that Andrew Weiss thing was there's a kind of a life-death. I can't quite articulate what attracts me to that painting. There's the death of the deer, but it's very beautiful, I find, in its starkness, in its winter landscape, and its color palette, which is all really of death. It's all like browns and whites, and not of death, but it's winter, and I want to figure out some way not to recreate that, but to get that. And I actually have done a lot of research on deer processors. So I might do a whole portrait campaign with them, with the deers, but then figure out how I can there's all those barns and stuff. So I'm figuring out some way to get to that, so it's constantly, but I don't know what I'm saying yet. So I'm kind of just ruminating on all of that. I've done a lot, as we talked about, there's just a lot of, I know for you too, there's just a lot of research that goes in, and you might chuck it all once you're in the studio or wherever you are. But I really have to think through why am I interested in this, and what do I want to go in and do, and then do it or pivot, once I have my feet on the ground. But yeah, the silence, I think that's what interests me. I guess. And I've never articulated that before, ever. So thank you for letting me kind of get to something.
Well, I see it in your work, but I have only one more recommendation. Mm-hmm. Next time you drive by that sign, get out and just put a comma after